Hello everyone, hopefully you are doing great. I hope this video finds you well. So, we talked about applied linguistics is 5 about what is applied linguistics and what linguistic applied mean, etc. So all these things are really important in the field of language or language teaching in general. So applied linguistics, it is a field that is really important for a language. In order to understand these two concepts, linguistics and applied, I recommend you to go to the video of IS5, in which you can understand this concept because they are very important in this field of teaching or teaching and learning language in general. So let's get started. And now, what is applied linguistic? So applied linguistic, these are some definitions about it, but because you have to know the history of applied linguistics, in general, you have to know what is LT or the history of LT in Morocco in general. Why I'm telling this to you? Because at the day of the exam, your teacher might ask you to write an essay about what is the history of LT here in Morocco, how LT was developed until now, etc. Okay? So also, when you write an essay, you have to bring examples. You have to pretend like a teacher. In real life situations, you bring examples from real life in general. Okay, so applied linguistics offers solution to language real life problems. Means it is the lifesaver for a language. So it brings theories, assumptions, ideas in order to make learning language very easy for any learners or any type of learner. Okay, so it provides teachers with skills and methodologies to change the teacher's intention of how they will teach a language in an efficient and effective way. Okay, this is in general what is applied linguistics. It is these definitions, it's not enough to understand what is applied linguistics. So as I told you, you have to go to IS5 in order to know the history. Okay, now we have three concepts which are really different and at the same time are really important in order to know these methods that we will talk about them in the next slides. Okay, so we have to know what is or what are the differences between approach, methodology, and technique. So all of them are related to each other. Okay, and there is a note you have to take. So applied linguistics is 5, is about minds, and applied linguistics is 6, it's about the classroom. What I mean, so applied linguistics of is 5, it's concerned how a learner or a child can learn a language. For example, we talked about theories of learning or approaches of learning, like behaviorism, innativism, constructivism, socio-constructivism, and so on and so forth. So every single theory explain how language can acquire a language. Okay, but now in this video or in S6 in general, it is about how we can teach language to learner. Okay, so let's know what is an approach. So an approach, as you can see here, is or a theory. Approach, the synonym of a theory or a way, okay, is a set of assumptions and theories about the nature of a language learning. In other terms, it explains how languages are learned or how minds can acquire language. For example, if we consider behaviorism, it is an approach or theory that views learning can occur through a process of stimulus, response, positive and negative reinforcement, as we have seen with Pavlov, Skinner, etc. So Skinner, a method, it's a set of techniques and procedures that are used systematically for presenting a language course based upon the premises of an approach. So a method, it's a set of technique and procedures that are used systematically for presenting a language. When we can present a language, of course in class, how we can give that class, which method we can use inside class that can be effective in order to teach our students, as we will see in the next slides. Okay, this is, for example, audio-language methods is based on the principle of behaviorism. Audio-language, as we will see, it is the first, of course, the first method that's based on an approach. Okay, as we will see. Technique is a way of carrying out a task, activity, or exercise as long as a method is a set of techniques. I'm sorry, here is a set of techniques and procedures that are intended to make the process of learning useful. So technique like PPP, presentation, practice, production, is one of the techniques used to teach a language. Yani PP, it is a frame for forming a lesson plan. We can teach vocabulary or grammar and so on and so forth. So technique is anything that can facilitate our teaching inside class. Any technique we can use it in order to give an efficient or effective teaching inside class. The last one, it is methodology. So methodology, simply, it is, of course, it is a choice by a teacher, or it is a style, or it is a teacher style. Because every teacher has a way of teaching. Because some teachers teach this way and others are different, etc. It is a set of classroom techniques and procedures irrespective. So it is irrespective of the particular method the teacher is using. It is related to the teacher's style and choice. It is personal, okay? Because there are some teachers can teach this way while other can teach another way, etc. So now let's come back to method, because our video is about methods of teaching. So as we have explained, methods, it's a set, of course, of techniques and procedures that are used systematically for presenting a language course based upon the premises of an approach. It is the practical implementation of an approach. Okay, this is method. But method, we cannot depend only on one method and we say this method is effective and can be the only one that can suit in this situation or in another situation. So every method can work for a specific time and situation. We can't judge this method and we say it is good. There is a way we can say adapt, never adopt. Means you can take principles from each method and integrate them according to your situations. We will see how. So the first method we have, it is grammar translation method. Grammar translation method. Before giving it is historical background, let's just focus on the grammar and translation A method. So grammar, what does it mean, grammar? So when we say grammar and translation, you have to understand this because most of methods that we will see, all of them have similarities, which can somehow can be confused for you. So when you say grammar and translation, you will see here grammar directly it's based on grammar, and translation, of course, it translates from the target language to mother tongue language or vice versa. So the grammar translation method or the classical method, it has many names. Is not new. It is the first method. It is old, and it has been used by language teachers for many years. At one time, it was called the classical method, since it was the first used in teaching of the classical languages like Latin and Greek. Earlier in the 20th century, this method was used for the purpose of helping students to read and appreciate foreign language literature. So, in general, this method, the aim of it was to teach Latin and Greek literature. This is the aim of this method. Okay? It was also hoped that through the study of the grammar of the target language, students would become more familiar with the grammar of their native language, and that this familiarity would help them speak and write their native language better. So when students study the grammar of the target language, they will better understand their grammar of their language. Okay, this is the aim of this method. Okay, so in order to summarize all this, because you don't have to take all these notes, but what is important to understand the main, because at the day of the exam you have to know how to apply it in order to collect examples from the real life. Okay, so finally, it was thought that foreign language learning would help students grow intellectually. It was recognized that students would probably never use the target language, but mental exercise of learning it would be beneficial anyway. So of course, the aim of this method in general, it's not speaking, but the focus is about the mental exercise, because it focuses more on grammar, on translation, etc., as we will see in its principles. So there are some principles of this method. This is the principle of this method in general, as you can see. So vocabulary is taught in the form of isolated word list. For example, now as a teacher, using this method, or a teacher who can use this method. Okay, so the teacher first will give to his students a text or a short paragraph, read it silently or loudly, but most of the time read it silently. And after that, he will ask his students to take some vocabulary, some words in isolated, means word by word. Okay, this is the vocabulary, and write it down. Either he will ask them to give the synonyms or translate it in their language or in their native language. Okay, language learning provides good mental exercise. So of course here the exercise, it is like filling the gaps, arrange these sentences, put these words in suitable places, etc. This is the kind of exercise in which can use in order to provide a good learning to mental exercise. Little attention is paid to the context of text, because the focus is not in the meaning of the text, but it is on vocabulary, to grammar, and so on and so forth. The grammar, deductive application of an explicit grammar rules is useful pedagogical technique. So the grammar, it was taught explicitly means the teacher from the beginning gave the role, gave the exercise, gave the examples, and the students are passive. They cannot participate in the learning of the grammar. In general, the teacher gave all things in the class. So the teacher is the authority in the classroom. So has the authority in the classroom. So no one can speak, no one can participate. So the teacher can do anything. A teacher supplies students with correct answer if they make errors or don't know an answer. So the teacher from the beginning gave the answer without giving a time to students to think about the answer, and of course they are angry about the errors. Okay? They don't like errors. As we have seen, if you still remember, in the behaviorism second language learning, errors and mistakes, and the difference between errors and mistakes, and we said that errors is a lack of information or knowledge, while mistake it's a lack of attention, and so on and so forth. Okay, all this we have seen it with behaviorism, if you still remember. Okay, students translate a reading passage from the target language into their native language. So the aim of this method, as we saw in the title, translation is very important in this method. And the last one, neglecting pronunciation, because the focus it is on the mental exercises, on the grammar, on the words, because they want to collect more vocabulary, more rules about the grammar, and they don't use it most of the time, using their target language, using their mother language. They don't use the target language all the time. They use the mother tongue language in the classroom, in the explanation, and so on and so forth. And there are some famous examples, if you still remember, when we were of course in the primary school, when we started learning the French language. Okay, this is where we can use this method effectively. These are some references you can check for more knowledge about this method, and so on and so forth. Okay, the direct method, it is the contradictory method for the translation method. Okay, after the failure that faced this method of grammar translation methods, so we need something new that can help us to improve this. Okay, it is the direct method. So as from the beginning, so in order to understand this method, we have to look at the title. The direct means something directly, we do it directly, as we see. So from its name you can see that teaching a language should be from the beginning, okay, without using the mother tongue language. As here, there are some weaknesses of this method. Of course, the weaknesses are passivity of students in classroom, using of the mother tongue language, okay, also neglecting students' attitudes toward learning, attitudes toward errors, and so on and so forth. These are some mistakes that this method made. Direct method. This method was initially developed as a reaction to the grammar translation method, in an attempt to integrate more use of the target language in instruction. So target language is very important in this method. It was revived as a method when the goal of instruction became learning how to use another language to communicate, because the aim of this language is the communication. Since the grammar translation method was not very effective in preparing students to use the target language communicatively, the direct method became popular. So, of course, the grammar translation method neglected the communication or pronunciation. And this method, it's like a natural approach, okay? As we will see here in its principles, lessons begin in a dialogue using a modern conversational style in the target language. This means that it gives a dialogues and students will read the dialogues loudly in order to, to, uh, to improve their pronunciation should be worked on right from the beginning of a language instruction, because students from the beginning start instruction. For example, a teacher, when he comes to the class, he started hello students, hello teacher, etc. He gives them a dialogue about anything in order to get started, uh, a lesson about anything, and never use the mother tongue in the class. Okay, there is no translation. All the teaching is in the target language. Grammar is taught inductively. Okay, inductively means the students and the teacher can build the knowledge together, started from examples to getting the rules of that examples. Okay, only everyday vocabulary and sentences are taught, means everything that we can use in our daily conversation vocabulary, these vocabulary are taught inside class in order to help students understand it in a clear-cut way. Okay, objects, so realia, anything can help students understand the meaning of vocabulary or effects based on pictures, realia, things, items, etc., ethnic materials, and so on and so forth. Okay, these are some exercises a teacher can use according to this method. Dictation, so a teacher reads a passage 3 times, and the first time teacher reads it in a normal speed while students listen, and the second time the teacher of course will read and ask his students to write word by word, and the third time he read it again in order to give students the time to check their work, and so on and so forth. Paragraph writing, so help students to write in their own words, okay, filling the blanks exercise, and so on and so forth. Of course, here the weaknesses of this language, or in general, it cannot used more in large classes. The audiolingual method. So, the audiolingual method, from its name, what can you guess? Of course, when you say audiolingual method, so we have audio and lingual. So audio means you listen to an audio, and lingual, it comes from lingua. It is a Latin language. Lingua, it is the tongue. So the tongue, it is the mouth. So we listen and speak. The meaning of it, it is the listening and speaking. And this method, it is known as Arami method. So Arami method is a story when the American Arami sends their arms, okay, to in the second word. So the need for speaking the target languages was the need to speak target languages in a fast way. So, and the scientists, linguists started thinking about a method that can suit in this side, and they started audiolingual method. So they listen and repeat. They listen and repeat. So just they listen and repeat. So the audiolingual, it comes from lingua and audio. So speak, listen and speak. Listen and speak. And also it is known as Arami method because Arami, this name came or dated back to the Second War when America sent sent, sent it is Arami to to their enemies in Arami, and the need to speak their languages. So the linguists started thinking about a method that can suit them in that way. So they started thinking about audiolingual in which they can hear what is going on and at the same time repeat it. Okay. Also, an oral based approach. It is an approach. Why? Because it is the first method that is based on approach, which was behaviorism. So all methods neglect, like grammar translation method, direct method, neglect an approach. Okay, however, it is very different in that rather than emphasizing vocabulary acquisition through exposure to its use in situations. Okay, the emphasis of vocabulary acquisition through exposure. So we need to expose to that language which we want to learn, like those immigrants who go to America or anywhere. So they started by listening, and after that they start repeating and drills and speaking to situation. The audiolingual method drills students in the use of grammatical sentence patterns unlike the direct method. Okay? Yeah, I mean the grammatical sentences means when the students or the learner in general want to learn a sentence, they learn it in grammatical sentences: subject, verb, object, and they drill it. They repeat it more than once. Okay, it is the first method that's centered on an approach. It is based on principles from behavioral psychology. So when we say behavioral psychology, we mean Skinner. We mean the principles of of course, the conditioning. The conditioning means the use of pleasant consequences to control the occurrence of a behavior. Means, okay, we gave a stimulus and a response, and we give a positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement in order to help the learner build a habit of their learning. Okay, helping learner to respond correctly to stimuli through shaping and reinforcement, so that learners can overcome the habits of their native language, and form the new habit required to be target language speakers. These are some principles, of course. New vocabulary and structures are presented in dialogue. For example, a teacher started by a dialogue. Every lesson he wants to teach, he starts by a dialogue. For example, if we want to teach greeting or hello, starts to dialogue, and he repeated more than 3 times. After that, he will ask students to repeat with him. After that, he give them in pairs repeat the dialogues between each other, and so on and so forth, because the repetition and imitation of their teacher until they memorize the sentences. Okay, grammar is induced from the examples in the active explanation. Means there is no explicit explanation at all. All the grammar is an induced way, means in an implicit way. Okay, the students can just guess what is the rule, what's the meaning, just by explanation, by just reading and listening from their teacher in a direct way. Okay, target language is used not the mother tongue. The teacher never use or with his students the mother tongue language. Drills are used. You know the drills. To drills, they repeated the sentence more than once. So Muhammad plays football. Repeat again. Muhammad plays football. Repeat again. Muhammad plays football. Okay, repeat. Muhammad plays football. And the students repeat and they change the subject. Sarah plays football. Reda plays football. And so on and so forth until the students memorize and grasp the patterns of a sentence or the structure pattern in general. Structural pattern. Vocabulary is taught in context, so any vocabulary a teacher gives it, he gives it in a context in order to understand it inside the context, without outside context, without translation, and so on and so forth. Focus on the pronunciation. When a student makes a mistake in pronunciation, some word like say, he try to to correct it. Okay, language learning is a process of habit formation. Of course, it is based on behaviorism or behavioral theory. As you know, behavioral theory believes that habit formation of a learning a language is very important. The role of teacher is likely an orchestra leader, directing and controlling the language behavior of her students. The teacher here, it's like an orchestra, like you know the orchestra. It's one who can control the group, say, and the rhythm, either high or low, and etc. Okay. Students are imitators of their teacher's model, or the tips she supplies of the model speakers. They follow the teacher's direction and respond as accurately as rapidly as possible. So this is the audiolingual method. These are some principles of it. So just you can focus on them and take it. And also you have to take this because it is very important for students who want, of course, to apply for teaching exam. These principles are very important in order to understand didactic. Okay, complete the dialogue. Okay, create a dialogue, etc. These are some kinds of exercises. The silent way. So these three methods are old, means are traditional. So we need something new, alternative, which can suit our aims today. So every era has some differences than the last. Okay, so the silent way, it is a method that is alternative, it is new, which is based on approach. So all these methods that we saw are old. They focus more on the neck and up, means they don't care about what students feel, what students can think, what is the problems of students. Okay, the teacher does not care about them at all. All his job, he gives them the knowledge. Okay, he does his or her work and accepts. This is the job of teacher. Okay, but according these two alternative methods, the job of teacher, it's like he takes them. Okay, he cares about his students. Okay, this approach, we call it, of course, this approach, it is humanism, which takes care about students as a whole person. Okay, so let's start by silent way. What can you understand from this title. So silent means silence. Way, it's a way which is silent. So this method, it means discover learning, came as a criticized method to the weaknesses of the audio language method. One problem with it was students' inability to readily transfer the habits they had mastered in the classroom to communicative use outside it. Okay, this is the problem. So students cannot transfer what they learn in their life in general. They cannot communicate outside the classroom. So the communication, it is just inside, but outside there are some problems. So this method came in order to find solution to these problems. The idea that learning a language meant forming a set of habits was seriously challenged. So habits, so it's all to form a habit and so on and so on. Okay, now that's why linguist Noam Chomsky, so as you have seen, Noam Chomsky is the criticized to the behaviorism. So because behaviorism pointed out that a mind is a blank slate, a mind is empty. So how we can fill it? So we fill it by knowledge through imitation. That's why Noam Chomsky said no. A mind has some utterances, has some mechanism, has language acquisition device, which is metaphorical. So just we need to expose the learner to language. By that, we can activate that mechanism of that language, which was grammar. Okay, so that language acquisition could not possibly take place through habit information, since people create and understand utterances. So we cannot learn a language through habit formation. Means we can make a habit and we started by it. But as long as people are creative and have some mechanism, so they can create something of them. Okay, they have never heard before. So this is true. If you take this, see, it is true. So now as a human we can create something new. Just by words we can make millions of sentences from small amounts of words. Okay, Chomsky reasoned, of course, Chomsky resigned. Language must not be considered a product of habit formation, but rather of a role formation. Accordingly, language acquisition must be a procedure whereby people use their own thinking processes or cognition to discover the rules of language they are acquiring. Okay, so the language acquisition whereby, so because acquiring is different from learning, as we have seen from the theory of the 5 hypotheses. Okay, these are some principles, of course. As you can see, teacher, these are some principles of this method. Teacher is in general or generally silent, only giving help when it is absolutely necessary. Okay, so when we say silent way, it is the ability to minimize the teacher talking and maximize the students talking, because the aim of this method, we want our students to produce, to create their language. Okay, and the teacher in this method, it's just the monitor, it's just the controller. Okay, this is the role of the teacher in general. Errors were inevitable. Okay, of course, students, the learner in general, because they are beginners and they start their language, see, they will make mistakes and errors because they don't have background knowledge before, so they are beginners like a children who want to learn a language. Okay, as a crash and theory, so it is a natural approach. Okay, it is based on using extensive use of silence as a teacher technique. So as I told you, so silence of teacher is very important inside this method. Its object is to enable students to use their language for expression because we need students to express themselves. Learning is facilitated if the learner discovers or creates rather than remembers and repeat what is to be learned. So because the aim is based on the Chomsky. So we need to create something which is ours, not the teachers or his teachers. Okay, of the teacher. Self-correction gestures, peer correction. So the students can correct themselves by themselves, and peer correction, and peer can correct each other, and the teacher does not interrupt them. Just he said repeat again until he make it correct. Learning is facilitated by accompanying, mediating, or physical object in general. Means like realia. For example, a teacher, he wants to teach the components of house, so he will bring ice brick, okay, or a house as an object, small house, and they can arrange it and name it in general, encouraging inductive learning by discovery. Okay, so inductive, all of them based on inductive, engaging in problem solving, using new language material, etc. So the problem, of course, of this method, we cannot apply it in our public schools because we have a lot of students. This is the problem of it. The next method, it is suggestopedia, or the suggestopedia means we don't suggest that. Okay, we set up psychological barriers to learning. We fear that we will be unable to perform, that we will be limited in our ability to learn, that we will fail. When result is that we don't use the full mental powers that we have. So here in general, it is about the psychological barriers, means the limitation that we have, the psychological problems when it comes to learning a language or when we are in new situations. And this has happened to us, to all of us, okay? We fear from our teacher, we fear inside class, we fear from our classmate to laugh on us, etc. That's why also there is a limitation, okay, of our power, our focus when we are inside class. We have just the first 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, after the first 5 minutes, our attention flies, okay? According to Lozanov and others, we might be using only 5 to 10% of our mental capacity in order to make better use of our reserve capacity. The limitations we think we have need to be, okay? This is just, after that, we lose that attention because we feel bored, we feel tired because we don't have anything interested inside class. That's why this is the problems. That's why this method was created in order to suggested the problems. The application of the study of suggestion to the pedagogy has been developed to help students eliminate, focus on this, to eliminate the feeling that they cannot be successful and or negative association they might have towards studying, and thus, okay, and thus to help them overcome the barriers to learning. Okay, and this also it is based on the question theories or five hypotheses. Okay, the affects, okay, the affects emotions or the affects, as you can see here, question theory, the emotional affection affects affective okay, these are some principles of this theory or of this method. Learning is facilitated in a cheerful environment. Okay, so in general, a teacher should decorate his class as we see in kindergarten schools. So they put rules in on the wall, okay, or stick it on the wall, decoration, etc., in order to not to help students feel relaxed inside class. The dialogue that the students learn contains language they can use immediately. So they use just the simple language, okay, inside class. Songs are useful. And if you still remember, there are some teachers in high school use songs in the beginning of a class in order to help students get relaxed, okay, and evoking positive emotions. The fine arts is very important, or like music, art, drama, etc. are auditation, auditioning, okay, are auditioning for a play enable suggestions to reach the to subconscious, because these arts goes immediately to subconscious. Okay, errors are corrected gently, not in a direct way. So when a student makes a mistake or an error, the teacher does not stop him immediately and correct it, but he or she corrects it in a direct way. Okay, peripheral learning is technique based upon the idea that we perceive much more in our environment than we concisely notice. It is claimed that by putting postures containing grammatical information about the target language on the classroom walls, students will observe the necessary facts effortlessly. As we said, okay, teachers should decorate by putting rules, things that are necessary or that should be learned by students on the wall, because subconsciously students will see it and grasp it in a direct way. Okay, in a indirect way. The next method, of course, most of problems of these theories cannot be used in large classes or in large classes. Community language learning. This method advises teachers to consider their students as a whole person, as I said at the beginning. So when you say community language learning, so community, it's like a society. So we learn inside a society. We don't feel that we are in class, but we feel that we are in a society that belongs to. Okay? That's it. So the teacher does not make students feel that they are in class, but they feel that they are in a society that belong to. And the teacher, it's just a controller. It is like a controller. controller. This method advises teachers to consider the student as a whole person. Learning means that teachers consider not only their students' intellectual but also have some understanding of the relationship among students' feeling, physical reactions, instinctive, protective reactions, and desire to learn. The community learning language method takes its principles from the general counseling learning approach developed by Charles. Of course, here, this method, the teacher is the counselor or it is a doctor, while students or learners in general are just clients. They come to the laboratory or to the laboratoire, okay, which is the class or the community that belongs to, in order to find solution to their problems. This is how this community language sees the class, okay. So okay, adults often feel threatened by a new learning situation. Threatened means they feel fair. They don't have the ability because they're adults, and this method is just for adults who want to learn a language. They are threatened by the change inherent in learning and by the fear that they will appear foolish. Garen believed that a way to deal with the fears of students is for teachers to become language counselors. So in order to overcome these fears, we need a teacher to be a counselor in order to know the problem of students and try to help them. A language counselor does not mean someone trained in psychology. It means someone who is skillful understander of the struggle the students face as they attempt to internalize another language. Means it doesn't mean a teacher should be a psychologist or therapist. He is just to have a charisma, okay? Know how to make students feel relaxed, okay? Get rid of their stress, their anxiety, their fears, etc. And feel that they are in their environment, they are in their society where can talk freely, where can express themselves without limitations, okay? These are some, of course, principles of these methods. The learner is not taught as a student, but as a client, okay? The students in this method, they are the clients. They are the patient who wants to get some prescriptions or some medicine, okay? The instructors are not taught of as a teachers, but rather as a trained, as a therapist, as a counselors. Individuals is counseling skills who adapted their roles as language counselors. The language counseling relationship begins with client linguistic confusion and conflict. So the teacher, when he gets inside the class, he started by hi, hello, how are you, and explains that we are here in order to learn what is your problems, how can I help you, etc. And why do you want to learn the language, what is your aims. These are some examples how we can use these methods. And by the way, these methods are used more with adults who want us to learn communication, things related to job or so on and so forth, like as we will see in the English for specific purposes. The focus on fluency rather than accuracy lead to inadequate control of the grammatical system of the target language. So the teacher focuses more on the fluency rather than accuracy. The fluency and accuracy, the accuracy is as grammar translation method, it focuses more on accuracy. And be careful, they might have a question at the day of the exam on the difference between grammar translation method and community language learning. In terms of fluency and accuracy, which one focuses more on fluency, which one is focuses more on accuracy. And here you have to bring examples how fluency can happen and how accuracy can happen. Okay, fluency, of course, we focus just on how we can use the language functionally or communicatively, while accuracy is focused more on the grammar, on the rules, on vocabulary, and so on and so forth, without taking into consideration the communicative skills, as the Noam Chomsky explained that. Okay? Students are to be considered as a learner client and the teacher as a teacher counselor. A relationship of mutual trust and support is considered essential to the learning process between students and teacher and students with each other. Students are permitted to use their native language and are provided with translation from the teacher, which they then attempt to apply. So, of course, they can use their target language when it is necessary, of course, okay, inside class. Because they are adults, they're still fresh, they don't have knowledge, so they can use it at the first time. Grammar and vocabulary is taught inductively. So most methods use inductive approach or implicit approach. Syllabus is designed by students in the beginning. So the students who can design the syllabus, who can decide what they should learn. Okay. These some techniques you can use it as examples. Type recording students. So of course in this method students recording themselves conversation and dialogues they say. After that they start to listen it and focus on what is going on, what are the mistakes that they have made, and so on and so forth. Transcription. Teacher produces a transcription of the sub record conversation with translation in the mother tongue language. This is then used for follow up activities or analysis, reflecting on listening and experience, and this is how we can use this method. The total physical response. So total physical response. So we learn physically. This means we coordinate or integrate listening, learning with actions, and this will help students to learn better. It's based on natural approach of Croatian theory. Means we don't want students to speak from the beginning, but we give them time, okay, as a child. It is natural approach. So remember, we have this method, physical response theory, also direct method. So these two methods, and also I think the audio language gives time to students before speaking. Okay, they don't oblige the students to speak from the beginning. And this also is a question: which method is based on Croatian natural approach? How natural approach can be used into total physical response, and etc. James Asher, the research, okay, starts first with understanding, ends with production. After the learner internalize an extensive map of how target language works, speaking will appear spontaneously. Of course, here, this method explains that if the students listen, okay, carefully and understand the rules and vocabulary of the target language, and the speaking certainly will appear spontaneously. spontaneously, means he will appear automatically. Of course, the student's speech will not be perfect, but gradually speech will become more to target like. Okay, notice that this is exactly how an infant acquires his native language, and also this is okay, a small example. You can take it. A baby spends many months listening to the people around it. Long before it ever says word, the child has the time to try to make sense out of the sounds it hears. No one tells the baby that it must speak. The child chooses to speak when it is ready to do so. Croatian natural approach. It is based on comprehension approach, so the students listen comprehensively. So the listening is very important when they understand and coordinate what they understand with actions. For example, a teacher will say, I'm hungry, and he puts his hands on his abdomen or stomach. I say, I'm hungry, or stand up and stand up and stand up, and he he do it by himself, stand up and sit down, and of course the students will imitate him. Okay, and after time he will say stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down, and students will imitate or act what their teacher said. Meaning in the target language can often be conveyed through actions. So the when they understand something, the student can translate the meaning in terms of actions. Memory is activated through learner response. Okay, target language is presented as a chunks rather than word by word, means he give phrases. Okay, uh, time, close the door, good, good morning, good afternoon, what is the time, etc. Chunks. The teacher is the director of all students' behavior, and the students are imitators of nonverbal model. L1 and L2 learning are similar comprehension-based approach. Error is tolerated because students at this stage can make errors. Pronunciation is developed through listening, so pronunciation will certainly comes when the students are ready to improve it. Errors are tolerated because they're still younger, and this method is just used with kids in the kindergarten. Okay, communicative language teaching. It is the past method. It is the new method that appears. Okay, some educators observe that students could produce sentences accurately in a lesson, but could not use them appropriately when genuinely communicating outside of the classroom. It is others not noted that others noted that being able to communicate required more than mastering a linguistic structure, due to the fact that language was fundamentally social. Within a social context, language users needed to perform certain functions such as promising, inviting, and declining invitations. So, in general, this method it's like community language learning. Okay, it is like community language learning and silent way. Okay, why? Because also it discussed the principles of Chomsky. It criticized Chomsky, not discuss. It criticized Chomsky theories because okay, students might know the rules of linguistic usage, but be unable to use the language. In short, being able to communicate required more than linguistic competence, it required communicative competence. So students should have skills of a communication in order to perform it outside the class, because the aim of the target language is to learn language in order to use it in situations when you are asking about permission, asking about help, asks or making requests, etc. Because this is our aim when we want to learn a language. So knowing when and how to say what to whom. This is the rule of this communicative language. Knowing when means the time that you have to say this or this, and how, the way that you can use in order to convey your message. What means the topic that you are talking about. To whom means the person that you are talking to. Is it a teacher? It is a professor. It is an indirector. It is a father, mother, etc., or a friend. It is the type. Communicative language teaching aims broadly to make communicative competence the goal of language teaching. So the teacher in general inside class, he gives situations while he is teaching the language. Means he puts students in situations, in real situations, like he might give students a role of a receiver in a hotel and the visitor, and the receiver, he will say, hello sir, how are you today, how can I help you? And the visitors, he might say, hello, thank you so much, I want a room in your hotel. Can you tell me where I can find, which room do you want, and etc. Or when you go to a doctor and you want to ask in order to help you to find how you can get recovery or speed recovery. Okay, whenever possible, language is as it is used in real context should be introduced. uh, Means you can use authentic language as it is used in real life in general context, asking for help, okay, making requests, apologizing, making promises, etc. One of the teacher's major responsibility is to establish situations likely to permit communication. As I tell you, hotel reception. Communicative interaction encourages cooperative relationships among students. It gives students an opportunity to work on negotiating, meaning the teacher acts as a facilitator in setting up communicative activities and as an advisor during the activity. Means the teacher just set the scene where students can act, like role play, games, dialogues, okay? These some situation where can students play. The grammar and vocabulary that students learn follow from the functions situational context. So the grammar is just from situations as what we have seen, okay, in the silent way and community language teaching and community language learning. This also the last method, it is past method. The notion of the past method era of language teaching was a concept that arose around the turn of the 21st century that described the need to both to rest the limited concepts of method as it was used in the previous century, noting that there might never be a method for all. Summed it up nicely. The focus in recent years has been on the development of classroom tasks and activities which are consonant with what we know about second language acquisition. As I told you at the beginning, or as I have told you at the beginning. So the past method in general, it is the modern method. Uh, According to this quote that I have said, adapt, never adopt, means teachers should choose the principle of each method and put them in situations. We don't have to rely on one method and say it is effective and efficient. We can use it with all situations because there are some situations where you can use this method and cannot work with this method. For example, if we come to countryside, we can use this method, but when we come to the city or go to the city, we cannot use it because the attitude of the students in the countryside is different from the students in the city, or vice versa. This is how past method work. It is the integration of methods, principles. The exam. So the exam, this is how you can pass an exam. So the teacher wants your creativity. Means you don't have to copy and paste what you have now about the method, but rather you have to show them that you understand well the lesson. Okay, bringing the examples, and as I have told you, you have to pretend like you are a teacher who have situations in class with his students or her students. So one of the principle of TPR, so total physical response. So be careful with this abbreviation because at the day of the exam, the teacher might give you just abbreviation. So be careful. Is that when students and anxiety is low, language learning is enhanced. How does this method lower student anxiety? What does the phrase teaching is subordinated learning mean? So here, which method we are talking about first? What does the phrase teaching is subordinate to learning mean? So when you say teaching is subordinate to learning, so first you have to identify which method. Yeah, of course, you say silent way, how silent way, etc. You have to bring example. Here, TPR and anxiety. When students' anxiety is low, of course, TPR is natural approach. We have to give time to students to think. Okay, because at the beginning it's like a child. Okay, we don't have to from the beginning and oblige students to speak because this will make them lose their charisma, their confidence, and etc. Okay, why and how teachers started to go beyond methods. Now, of course, we are talking about past method, modern method. Why? The reason, as I explained, because there are some methods can work with some classes, and some method cannot work with some classes, some classes. And this method can work in countryside, but cannot work in city. Okay, or vice versa. These are some examples that I bring. This is how you can write an essay. First, you can just define the method or the era of the method, and you have to write like this sentence. This essay is going to discuss what? For example, if I want to talk about TBR, so TPR. So after, you can say, or you can just start by the weaknesses of a method and bring this as advantages. Okay, for example, if we want to talk about direct method, so the direct, after the failure of the grammar translation method in helping students to communicate while they are learning the target language, the direct method comes as a chance or comes as as a as a saver for students to use their language communicatively. So in this essay, or this essay is going to discuss the differences between grammar translation method and the direct method. So the body, your background knowledge and real example. For example, the grammar translation method, it's a method that it focuses more on memorization and translation. So students here, for example, students translate the text from their mother tongue or the target language to the mother tongue in order, or vice versa, while they are reading it, and memorize the vocabulary in an isolated way. While the direct method give the instructor the instruction from the beginning with the target language without translating the words. For example, the teacher explaining English and using English and so on and so forth. This is how. Conclusion, just you have to restate what have been mentioned. This is concerning the method and concerning in general the exam. Now, assessment. So when we say assessment, in general, it is the evaluation. We need to see the level the students can reach when we taught them something. We need to see how much they get from that lesson that we have explained. So it is an ongoing process of collecting information about students' competence and performance. Yes. So assessment is just we collect information about students. Okay? How much they are better in that. What are the weaknesses and what are the strengths of their learning. Based on that, we can build another things, can change our ways of teaching and learning. Okay? So we have testing tools like the means of assessment the teacher uses to assess students' performance, like test, portfolio, presentation, exercise. So this test or these tools are alternative, okay? Like portfolio and presentation are alternative. Exercises and tests, it is traditional, of course, but they still work until today. Diagnostic tests, these are the type of test. Of course, when you say diagnostic test, it is a test that the teacher gives it at the beginning of the session or at the beginning of the year in order to see how much the students bring with them from the last year. Proficiency test, it is like TOEFL or IELTS. It is about the proficiency, how well you mastered the four skills: speaking, writing, and listening and reading. Placement test, it is about the placing the students according to their abilities and level of their study in a groups inside class. Okay, achievement test, it is about how much the students achieve from a course. Okay, formative and summative, it is two types that maybe a teacher can ask you about. What are the differences between formative assessment and summative assessment? And formative assessment, it is the way that we can form the learning of students while we are teaching. And it is ongoing assessment. It is the assessment that can take place anytime. Okay? For example, a teacher explain but suddenly stop and ask someone. And based on that, it is a type of assessment. You can take this example. But summative, it is the process of assessing students' performance at the completion of a unit, course, a year, etc. Okay? It is about, here in formative assessment, it is about quality. Okay? It is assessment for learning, while here it is assessment of learning, means how much the students learn from a course, but how much the students master the course. You see the difference. Okay. Now, the principle of an assessment, in order to have a reliable and valid assessment. Okay, when it is valid, it is, we call it validity, and reliable, it is reliability. For example, reliability, a reliable test is a test that is characterized by consistency. A reliable test is a test that renders the same consistent result when it is administered to the same students in two occasions. For example, a national exam of baccalaureate students. So the result that this national exam gave the last year should give in the next year the same result. So students, for example, 60% of students get a high grade. We say 15 out 20. So the same result should be done in the same class or in the same group of class, the same group of students. Okay, or as a teacher gives an exam to different groups, and the all groups should give the same results. Okay, validity is about the contents. Okay, should not be biased. The content effective test. So validity is an important feature in designing an effective test. It refers to extent to which a test measures what it intends to measure. For example, if a teacher does not explain something in the class, should not be in the exam. So what is very important, what is explained in the class should be in the exam. That's all. Authenticity should be authentic, okay, and corresponds of the characteristics of a given language test task to the feature of target language use. Okay, authenticity, for example, authenticity for an exam that can use like give project to students about make a project about something and bring it to the class. It is a kind of test that is authentic. Okay. Practicality, so should be practicality. If we give, so there are some tests that are difficult, so need more time, so we give enough time also. Okay, in practicality here the instructions should be clear and marks allow to each item should be reasonable. Which effect, of course, the effect that can affect or influence the test, like national exam. So national exam students will not think about anything else except the national exam. Okay, the characteristics. Now this is a type of exam, and a teacher, Salah, who wrote this, you can take it as an example. This is how you can see the characteristics and uses of alternative assessments. This is, as you can see, this is essay, okay, about the characteristics and uses of alternative assessment. This is an introduction, this is body, and this is assessment, as you can see. Okay, one important element in any teacher's job is assessment, as it allows to evaluate the success of the teacher's instructions and the students' learning outcomes. This essay will unfold some of the key characteristics and uses of alternative assessments as I show you. Okay, of course, some key of characteristics will unfold, will discover, and uses of assessments. So alternative assessment, to illustrate, this is an example, as you can see, etc. So examples from real life situations, so you can take it, okay, as an example. This is concerning assessment. So SP, I will do another video about it. SP, or English for specific purposes. So we say English, so a teacher design a course that is specific for a specific type of students, either doctors, pilots, or whoever design the course. Okay, for example, doctor wants just to learn communication, and the teacher will design a course that is for specific purpose, which is communication, and he will just bring dialogues, things in order to help doctors to learn communication. ICT in general, it is about coordinating or integrating the technologies while we are teaching, like projects, mobile phone, laptop, etc. These are some types of information and communication technologies. In general, it is the integration.